It's been a fortnight of reckoning for Tasmanians and the city of Launceston.
They're hearing evidence that this was happening right in front of them, whether they knew it or not. It was honestly confronting. I have even learnt things this week that I never knew about.
Tiffany Skeggs spoke to 7:30 early this year about her abuse at the hands of now notorious paedophile James Jeffrey Griffin. She knew him through netball, but he was also a nurse on the children's ward of the Launceston General Hospital for 18 years. Tiffany Skeggs reported him to police in 2019.
I was told that Griffin had been on their radar for quite some time, but they just needed someone like me to come forward and say so.
Calls were left unsatisfied.
Tasmania's Commission of Inquiry has now heard numerous people had already complained to police and the hospital.
And still nothing was done. It's heartbreaking to know that that's how our system will respond.
The inquiry has heard there were years of complaints about Griffin's behaviour with children on Ward 4K, including kissing, cuddling, texting and calling. He was counselled and given warnings not to overstep professional boundaries. And there were reports to police about Griffin taking suggestive photos of young girls, about his behaviour with Tiffany Skeggs, as well as allegations about child exploitation material. The biggest warning came from Kylie Pern, a social worker at the Launceston General Hospital. The inquiries heard she told the hospital in 2011 that she'd been abused by Griffin years earlier.
I told the HR representative that a nurse on 4K had sexually abused me as a child and also one of my friends, and I felt he was a risk on that ward. The response was that there was nothing they could do without a conviction. That they looked into him, I remember those words, and that he had been on 4K for a long time. They said that he would cause too much of a fuss if he was taken from that ward.
After telling the hospital, Kylie Pern says she went to the police, but didn't press charges because she didn't feel safe.
And I also made a promise to myself at that time that if anyone else ever came forward, I would 100% follow through and have him charged.
She did her bit. She handed it over to the right people, and they did nothing.
The Launceston General Hospital has no file note of Kylie Pern's 2011 allegation, despite her manager giving evidence that he went with her to Human Resources and heard her disclosure. A former HR consultant told the inquiry he didn't recall the meeting, and police told the inquiry they have no record of her disclosure to them. Griffin's direct manager has reflected that his everyday behaviour included hugging children and calling them baby and princess, and staff had accepted that as just Jim.
We were deceived, we were manipulated, and we were sold a version of Mr. Griffin that he wanted us to believe.
Subsequently, I'm aware that none of us had any education and training in child sex abuse or grooming behaviours.
None of you at the hospital?
None of us.
In 2017, one of Griffin's colleagues reported him for discussing his sexual desires with adolescent female patients. The complaint was treated as low level, and Griffin received warnings about professional boundary breaches.
I always thought that education and redirection would change that behaviour.
At what stage should someone simply be moved away from children? That was a question.
Okay, I'm not sure of the answer to that question.
We know there was all of these red flags raised.
Griffin was finally suspended from the hospital when police began investigating Tiffany Skeggs' complaint in mid-2019. He was charged over his abuse of Tiffany Skeggs, Kylie Pern and other children, but took his own life before he could be tried. The inquiry heard hospital HR undertook a desktop review of its own files soon after James Griffin was suspended in 2019. But the hospital still hasn't done a comprehensive internal investigation into how he went undetected for so long.
It was a catastrophic failure by your hospital and by you.
I accept that there were many failings and it was catastrophic as the outcome of it, as I identified, and I am extremely regretful that obviously it's occurred.
On the weekend, the Tasmanian Premier announced a review of the Launceston General Hospital's governance and human resources, and he apologised to survivors.
I am so terribly sorry for your hurt and your pain that you have endured due to the failures of governments, present and past.
While hearings on the hospital are wrapping up this week, the Commission will continue investigating abuse at other Tasmanian institutions.
This is everything for Tasmanian children moving forward. Tasmanian children have been subjected to abuse, expected to put up with that abuse. This is it. This is the time. The time is now.